Hello, it's been a while since I've been live on YouTube, and it's good to be back. I'm uh, I'm actually quite happy to say that it's a new year, and um, yeah, glad to be here. And I hope that you're all doing well, and that you're having a good 2025 so far. The new year always kind of raises these questions of, do we pick up new languages, and how do we do it, and is that a New Year's resolution that we take on? And yet these kinds of things are always really interesting questions for me. Some of you may know that I'm not a big fan of the whole New Year's resolutions, and the reason is that I find that if you put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to New Year's resolutions, that if those plans don't work out, then you're basically left with this empty feeling of, like, when do I restart? Do I wait for another week, another month, another year? And so I think that the best time to start learning a language is right now. So whether that right now is today, tomorrow, next Wednesday, whenever that right now is for you, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to wait for the 1st of January. There's no magic thing that happens on the 1st of January, or even another start of a month or anything like that. There's really nothing magical about that. And I know it can feel clean, crisp, and clear to start something when we're talking about, a new way of working, or a new habit, or a new thing that you want to do. And I get that. The only thing is that if that doesn't work out, then, as I said before, you get stuck. So there was this meme that I remember on social media a while back, and it was about this idea of, well, somebody lamenting that they hadn't got a nice big tree in the garden to sit in the shade, and they said, I should have planted that tree. I was planning to do it, and the best time to plant that tree was actually 20 years ago, but the second best time to plant the tree is now. And so it goes for languages. And this is kind of the thing that always comes into my mind when I think about people's goals, ideas for learning languages, or even anything really, just start, and to have that momentum and motivation to do things regularly, because it's the regularity and the repetition that really, they're the things that count. Now, I've been learning languages all my life, and you might look at me and think, okay, it's easy for you to say that. And yeah, it's a fair comment. I have been doing this for a long time, and yes, I do have an idea as to what I want to do and how I want to achieve it for the most part, but it doesn't always work that way, even for me. Sometimes I really struggle as well with motivation, or I have to reevaluate what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And these are things that often people point the finger and say, well, that's obvious. Well, yeah, it kind of isn't. It's one of those things where it comes to motivation and why we're doing something, that it sounds and seems easy to be able to say to other people, yeah, you can just find the motivation, or if you want to learn a language, then that's just enough. Or if it doesn't work out, then what happens? Is it just that you lost motivation? And what's the internal dialogue or monologue within yourself? What are you telling yourself about what happened? Are you writing yourself off as a failure? Are you deciding that actually now that's just something I can't do? And so you feel that sense of, wow, maybe this doesn't work. And that idea of failure, of not actually being able to get through the first week or month or whatever of actually learning, that can be quite demotivating. And I have to say that, yeah, these are the things that I find quite important. In fact, probably the most important thing about really, really going for language. Let's see, what's the question? Hello, Gladson. Your English is extremely clear to understand. Too bad most people don't speak like that. Thank you. You're very kind. I hope that I'm easy to understand. That would be, it's always good feedback to get. Yeah, when it comes to learning, and when you're learning a language or doing anything, and if you don't manage to meet the first goals, it can be very easy to just stop and give up. The fact is that these things require quite a lot of time and energy and dedication to be able to continue learning over a long period of time. And this isn't something that happens overnight. And often the ideas that we have in our heads and what we want can be ideas generated or goals generated by what we see other people doing online, or what we see people doing around us, or what we imagine. Really, the imagination is the thing, is that, even what people are doing, or online or offline, the imagination of what you imagine they're doing is the thing that we fixate on. And we assume sometimes that other people have certain goals and therefore we should have those goals too. And that's where I think it can get quite difficult to manage expectations of what you're going to do, and also what the reality of that actually is. So this is where I think that sometimes, even when it comes to languages, it's extremely important for us to reevaluate the reality of our initial motivation, drive, energy, and desire to learn, and then in turn reevaluate over time to see, actually, is that realistic for us? Is that something we can actually do? Is that something that works in our lives? Is it something that we can get the repetition on and actually move forward with our learning? Or is it actually something that we should reevaluate and say, well, maybe not this now, maybe something else, or maybe we need to cut back on the goals that we had? And there's nothing really wrong with doing that. And quite often I get the impression from people I talk to that it feels almost like you've given up, or you've failed, or you haven't met those targets, so therefore we throw everything away. And we have this expression where I'm from, to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And really what that means is, you throw everything good away just because something's gone bad, or is no longer clean, clear, or what we imagined it would be. And I think if we do that with everything that we take on in our lives, actually it's a fairly detrimental thing for our own well-being and our own mental health, and how we then in turn feel about what we're doing, why we're doing it. So these questions, actually, I find become more fundamental to the ability to succeed when it comes to language learning. And it's one of the things that I have found during coaching and language learning therapy sessions that I've led and worked on with groups and individuals, where working over periods of time, where we see how we fare when we're in good health, when we're really highly motivated at the beginning potentially, and then right the way through when we're actually not doing so well, or we're sick, or we've got holidays, or we've got other commitments, or things that really challenge what our ability is to do. So yeah, these are the kinds of things that I think are important when it comes to language learning. And for me personally, it's something that I not only talk about but also practice. And I've had false starts with languages in the past. I mean, I've had false starts with Arabic. I've had false starts with Scottish Gaelic, where I've started the language. It's lasted for even up to a year or so, and I've been studying and thinking I'm making some progress, but actually it's not been that great, and not being particularly happy with that. Buena, Tiffany. But then what I do is I then either feel that maybe, okay, I should stop, or have I not met my goals, so therefore I should deem that as a failed project. Well, I sometimes think that maybe it's not the right time. So my first instinct is to evaluate what was realistic about my goals and what wasn't, and then in turn think, well, was it fair of me to expect something that was not possible? And then when I've gone back again later, at a later stage, to see if I can get back up to where I was and move forward, then sometimes I do that and it's possible and it works pretty well. But other times it doesn't. I had that with Korean. I did a year of Korean, and I was really hoping that I would power through certain things in the language, and it just didn't happen. So instead, what I did is I actually reevaluated what I had done, what else I could do, and what else I could be happy with. And I decided in the end, instead of powering through these courses, that what I would do is actually learn and be comfortable with the reading, the script of the language, get an overview of how the language works, its grammar, and be able to understand some of the similarities between the Korean and other related languages. Okay, I see a question here. Done a language. Do you have any advice for Arabic? If your goal is to know both Fusha and dialect, what's the most efficient path forward? Should we mimic the path of a native speaker or learn Fusha first? Very good question. When it comes to Arabic, yeah, I think minds are changing on this. It always used to be that you would study Fusha and then move to the dialects. Now, dialect is a strange word when it comes to Arabic. I know it's the most commonly used one, but I think I prefer language variety. And I say that because the varieties are quite different. And when it comes to the North African varieties, that they're not mutually intelligible necessarily with Gulf varieties. So I think it comes down to what you want it for. If your goal is to read Arabic, then of course Fusha is used in written Arabic. People use it to communicate. It's also, if you're going to travel between Arabic-speaking countries and you want to be able to flip from one variety to another, or be able to communicate, then what tends to happen with various speakers of Arabic is that they will move towards the standardized Fusha form and use words from that so that they can make themselves more easily understood to other people from other countries who speak other varieties of Arabic. So if that's your goal, then yes, for sure, Fusha would probably be a good thing to do. But if your goal is to go and just spend time in a given country where Arabic or a form of Arabic is spoken, then perhaps actually just directly learning that variety of Arabic is the right thing to do. There are languages that have developed from many places around the world, and from the Semitic family, we've got from an Arabic base, a language like Maltese that I studied last year, ready for the Polyglot Conference in Malta. And yeah, people don't learn Fusha when they go to learn Maltese. It's no longer the done thing. I mean, I imagine a time where that was a thing that was done, and even people in Malta don't tend to learn Fusha unless they're studying Maltese at university as a first language. So there's definitely something to say about learning a spoken form first. I think a key thing to consider is, are there the materials available for you to do that? And if there are, then perhaps that is a good way forward. Because also, some Arabic speakers don't feel as confident actively speaking Fusha, so it can feel a bit weird for them doing it. I mean, we're basically getting to speak what is, for all intents and purposes, a written form of a language, and a language they only really hear in very formal situations. So yeah, I'll leave you with all those additional questions and my thoughts on that. There's not really the jury's out as to, in terms of, is there a definite way forward? I would say probably not. Did you say Korean? Isn't it considered a language isolate? It would be incredibly hard to learn if you're used to relating language families. Yes, it was Korean that I mentioned. Yes, I think it's considered a language isolate. It just depends on your point of view, because there are other Koreanic languages that were, I think, spoken in the past, but also depends on whether or not you consider Jeju a separate language. I know a number of Korean speakers don't, but that doesn't mean that that's the only answer to that question. So if you were to consider that there's Jeju as well, and that's still spoken, then you've got at least two. And then if you consider the divergence of the Korean spoken in the north versus the south, then yeah, maybe that will continue, and maybe at some stage that language evolution will just continue. But yes, I mean, you could say that it's a language isolate of sorts. Does that mean that it's not got anything related to it, though? I mean, we talk about language isolates as though they literally have nothing in common with anything else, and that's not quite true. So Korean used to use Chinese characters, and those Chinese characters in turn have brought words into the Korean language, and therefore these words in turn are of Semitic origin. And so yes, you do have this crossover. And if you study Korean, as I did briefly, and Japanese, as again I did briefly, you do feel some similarities in terms of how certain grammatical structures work. So particles and things like that are reminiscent of each other. And so yes, isolates, but also nothing happens in a vacuum. And even languages that are unrelated will often borrow from their neighbours, or they'll have history with neighbouring languages. Or when it comes to a language like Hungarian, even in Europe, it's got influences from other languages that have interacted with it over the centuries. Even Basque has influenced and been influenced by neighbouring languages. These things just happen. So true language isolates, in the way people imagine of it's got the zero influence, that's fairly rare. And I think the history is just the way it is, that people need to communicate. Therefore, we borrow and lend and take words and whatever from other languages. Let me see. Thanks. You're welcome. You're welcome. I believe so. Yeah, what I was saying about then, if you're learning a new language, then these goals are extremely important to know. Human being, well put. I agree. There are similarities with particles and grammatical structure, and just the feel of it. Yeah, that's how I felt. Thank you. I'm glad you agree. I believe that when it's outside the familiar structures such as Cyrillic, Kanji alphabet, and others, it can be very difficult for people who don't have contact with them to learn them. Yeah, there can be issues with reading new scripts, and that's certainly something I've had experience with as well. And I'm not one of those people that naturally gravitates towards learning new scripts and feeling that they feel very natural very quickly. It takes me quite a while for them to truly, genuinely feel part of who I am. And I would say that, yeah, there aren't that many scripts that I felt that, I have to sometimes, I really have to sort of work it out for a number of languages that I've studied, where I've learned a new script. I've had quite a challenge with my study of Igbo, but I'm trying to be resourceful and use whatever content I can get. Sometimes I can get my husband to help. Husband's always useful to help out. Having speakers close to you is always useful. Family members and friends, and being able to get access to sort of the source, the language. But yeah, I think there are languages certainly where we lack the materials to be able to learn. It can be quite challenging, and I think you're doing a great job, Tiffany, continuing with it, studying it, and really plugging at it. It can be quite disconcerting sometimes, and I totally understand that when you've got sort of a language that you're faced with where you don't have the same amount of material available that you would for other languages that are more commonly studied. I wanted to just check with you, because I'm using a new microphone and camera for this live, and I just wanted to check, what do you think of the quality? Is it better than normal when I speak? Is it easier to understand? It's great. Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Oh, great. Very good. That's better than before. Fantastic. Wonderful. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this isn't, I'm not going to do any kind of branding for this. I'm not paid to do that. But I got a new camera and mic based on some advice that I got from a lady called Yu from Vietnam, who was at the Polyglot Gathering, and she was working with Tim Keeley, and I saw what she was using, and it looks really neat. And so I got one myself, and thought, okay, it's worth the investment. I could see the results from hers, and I thought, okay, well, I'll try it on the computer to do a live. And I'm very glad to hear that it's better, and it works a lot better than my regular camera. That's good. I'm aware that I haven't got additional lighting, but otherwise, that's great. Hoi Richard, lang geleden. Hoe is het? Ja, goed, bedankt, Olga. Ja, hoe gaat het met jou? Could you please update us on the number of languages you've mastered in 2024, if any? Thanks, huge fan here. Oh, that's very kind of you, Fabio. So mastered, I don't know if I ever really, I don't know, mastering a language is kind of a difficult thing to say. But 2024, the big news, I guess, for me, language-wise, is that I sat the 4th grade Cornish language exam, which is the final level of Cornish that you can do. And I passed. I got a distinction in that exam. The exam involved, so it was like 7.5 hours of exam that I did over in total. It was for the language itself. So I did listening, reading, writing, speaking, which is, I think, most common things that you'd imagine. I also did a literature paper, one book on old texts of Cornish. We studied Passio Christi, which is Passion of the Christ, and it's one of the 3 miracle plays of Cornish. And then I did a modern piece as well. That was a book called Digi Holla, and I had to read that for my exam. Then I was tested on the literature, and then I did a part on place names in Cornwall, so about the origins of place names, how they're made up, and that was pretty cool, actually. I enjoyed learning about it, because it also explains some place names in other parts of the UK too, which is really cool. And then I had a paper on the history of the Cornish language. So we looked at various figures from the Cornish language movement, and also looked at the causes for the decline of the language, and that was extremely interesting to go through. I really enjoyed all of the course, and I enjoyed doing the exam. Actually, I quite like exams, so yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I finished that in the summer, and I continued with the groups that I attend, so sort of language speaking Cornish, and a study group that we have. So now what I do is from September, October, I was invited to join the terminology panel for Cornish, and so I sit on the terminology panel now, and we discuss words in the dictionary and their etymologies, where they've come from, whether they're written correctly. We deal with queries from people who question things about words in the language, and it could be whether it's the right word, whether we need additional definitions, or whether it's to do with plurals or whatever. But it's yeah, or spelling even, and it's super interesting. There's quite a few people on the panel. I think what I probably add to the panel is because I've studied a number of Indo-European languages, I have that that language comparison that I do in my head. So I kind of, the etymologies and shared roots and things like that maybe is kind of useful to the group, whereas the other parts of the group, the other members, a number of them have got way more experience with the Cornish language than I have, and they've been dealing with the language for many years, and so the whole thing is kind of a learning process for me, as well as something I feel like I'm doing something useful. And I think that's important when you're learning a language like Cornish, that you feel like you're able to add something and give something back to the people who have sort of supported you in the learning process, and that I've really liked. So yeah, thank you for asking. That's my big thing for this for last year. I did a number of other smaller projects too for languages, but yeah, that's, if you're asking about languages, I'm not going to say I've mastered Cornish, because it feels too much, but yeah, I mean, I finished all of the grades, and I've joined the terminology panel. So I mean, I guess that's the closest I'm going to get to be able to say I've done. It's taken many years. I've been studying it for over 4 years, so it's not been a short trip for me. It's been quite a long journey, and obviously, as a speaker of Welsh, you'd expect maybe that I'd learn it more quickly, but that's not the case. It's taken time. I've looked at some language adjacent stuff as well. So I did a course in Breton, an introduction to Breton, which I found really interesting, and to see how that fits into the Celtic languages. I've done more courses in Irish and more studies in Irish, but my Irish is still not great by any stretch of the imagination, and also Gaelic, and again, my Gaelic isn't particularly good either. But what I enjoy about all of these language adjacent studies that I do is that it gives me additional awareness of the family as a whole, and how they all slot together. So yeah, I quite like that. It's kind of like a big Sudoku puzzle, really. Let's see. I had a few other questions there. I'm just realizing that I've been talking a lot. You're very welcome. I hope that answered your question. Just see. Oops, daisy. What's going on here? Okay. Ciao, Richard. I got a question that probably, or surely, someone asked you. What do you think about prioritizing listening rather than speaking or writing? I think it depends what you want to do. I mean, listening is a skill that I'm reminded of actually more and more that is quite challenging for people learning a language. So I totally get that there's a need to look at it and focus on it. So I'm going to give you an example from Cornish, because clearly Cornish isn't a language that you typically hear a lot of, unless you really make the effort. So with the study group that I work with on a Friday, we've been studying together for a while now, and what I do is I now help with the listening activities. So I take a news story in Cornish. They're quite short, they're a couple of minutes, and we listen to it together and without any text. And what I sort of do is say, we're just going to listen to it once through, and then we're going to see what we understand, and we talk about it. And then we listen to it again, and then we do the same thing. We talk about what we've understood, and if there's anything new that's come up from listening a second time. And then the third time, I put the text on the screen, and then we listen to it again, and then we discuss again how that helped. And then we take it in turns to take a line each, read it out loud, and then translate it into English, and discuss any grammatical features or words that are in there to help us better understand and to remember the language. So we kind of quite a lot of repetition in there, and then we agree how we found the text overall. And yeah, I mean, that's been working quite well. So we do that once a week. Cornish, that's one of the pain points for a number of people who learn Cornish, is the listening. And I think that's true for a number of languages. So yeah, doing things like that I think is useful. Would I prioritize it over speaking and writing? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I think all of them are important. All of these different things are important. So I'm not sure I'd prioritize it, but certainly I recognize the importance of listening and getting the practice in and doing it in a way that's palatable, I guess. Great to see you again. Nice to see you too. Thank you. What's your personal view? What's the story? What's your personal way, knowing and everyone is different? My personal way for learning languages, I guess you mean. I don't know if I have a single way. It would depend on the language I'm learning, and it depends where I'm learning it, the reasons why, and what it is. I hate to give these fluffy answers back that aren't very precise, because I know we kind of look for precision, and we look for, the one answer, the pill that we can take, or the thing that we can do that will just work. I don't think that truly exists as a thing. I think that really different methods will work for different people at different times and in different situations, and so there needs to be a degree of flexibility when it comes to adapting oneself and the methods or input that we get for learning. So for me, that's the same. I don't particularly feel that I have one set thing that I do. The only things that I can say with any great certainty to you is really that, yeah, any language that I've learned well and use a lot, I have integrated into my life. So therefore, I don't really think about it anymore. I just use it, and therefore I'm not counting the hours I use it. It's part of my life, and that therefore means that I'm getting a lot of input repetition. Some languages just happen to fit into my world more easily than others, and there's no rhyme or reason always as to why that works. So I can give you two examples of languages I studied fairly intensively for a while. Last year was Maltese, and the year before was Hungarian, and I did them both for the conference, the Polyglot Conference. Now, weirdly, Hungarian stuck with me for a little bit longer, for at least a year longer. I've not studied it for a few months now, but I did continue with it in 2024. And it was because I found a very nice person to talk to on italki. I enjoyed my chats with my teacher. Did I improve a lot more? I'm not sure, but I certainly enjoyed it and I carried on with it. So it became part of a routine for me. With Hungarian, though, it's quite easy to say basic things in Hungarian. So because they have this sort of, an infinitive form, you can say quite a lot. So if you know how to say I want or I like, and then you just add an infinitive to say to swim, to go, to walk, to shop, to do, to eat, to whatever, you can just add them, like you can do in a number of languages, right? Now contrast that with Maltese, where it's a Semitic language. The base form of the verb that you get is the past tense of third person singular masculine form, and then from that you have to then deduce the infinitive form, the imperative form, and then from the imperative form you have to add the prefixes to create the present tense. And there's no infinitive form in Maltese. You therefore have to basically use a construction like I like, I like I do, or I like that I do, or so you're conjugating both verbs. And as you can imagine, if you have to learn all of these conjugations and say them very quickly together, it's quite complicated and quite difficult and really quite challenging. So that for me was, it was not easy. But, and this is the big but, when it comes to reading Maltese, it's actually quite easy. And the reason it's easy is because a lot of the higher level vocabulary that you use on media for the news, or even in museums, for example, comes from English or Italian, and that really helps. So even though the conference is over in Malta, I actually still read Maltese news because I follow it on Instagram, and I stop and I watch the clips and I read the news in Maltese pretty much on a daily basis, and maybe even a couple of times a day. I've got this unusual knowledge of what's going on in Malta currently, which is kind of bizarre. I didn't expect that to happen, but I really enjoy it and I like the language. I hope that continues, and I hope that I will continue to improve my Maltese. But I guess we'll see what happens. But yeah, I typically do that kind of thing, and it really depends on what I'm doing it for. So yeah, for Hungarian, for example, I wouldn't be able to read news articles because the language ramps up quite quickly from the basics to be able to understand things like that easily. Whereas Maltese is like super hard, high entry level to speak and to feel like comfortable making basic sentences. But then the harder stuff that you would imagine in Hungarian is actually way easier in Maltese to read. Yeah, so as you can see, it's very difficult, therefore, to say, oh yeah, just do this or just do that. Because if I were to use Maltese as an example, I'd say, oh, just read the news. But of course, you can't do that if you're talking about Hungarian or Greek even. The Greek news stories are a lot more difficult than the sort of Greek that you just use to chit-chatting with people. Yeah, it's kind of difficult. That's why it's difficult. I hope that experience and giving you that contrast helped to sort of understand what I mean when I say this. Okay, the higher frequencies of your mic is sharp as crystal. No sibilance, noise, no bass. Oh, okay. I'm trying to. No sibilance, yeah, noise, no bass. It's very well equalized. Oh, wow, thank you. I really appreciate that very detailed feedback. That's very cool. Het gaat goed, dank je. Ik ben nog steeds dezelfde talen aan het leren. Ja, geweldig hoor. Ja, ik ook. Green Ghost. Chest. Do you know of any good books for comparative Slavic etymology? The short answer is no, because I can't think of one off the top of my head. There was an Indo-European one that included some Slavic languages. It was a blue book that I've got on my Kindle somewhere. I kind of leafed through it a few times, but it's not particularly it doesn't, it's not all encompassing, but it possibly did the job that you're looking for. I can have a look and see if I can get it and sort of write it somewhere. But I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But in terms of just comparisons with Slavic languages, I'm not aware of any books or titles. I may have seen things. It feels like something I may have seen, but I can't say with 100% certainty. And I don't like to kind of just pretend that I know. Do you have any advice for multiple Slavic languages generally? Multiple Slavic languages, for learning them, it can be extremely frustrating. Depends on the languages. So, I mean, typically, I always think it's better to learn languages that are further apart, first of all. So, learning languages from the different branches of the Slavic language family tree would possibly help out in terms of not getting them all mixed up. I personally find it quite challenging to speak languages from the same sub-branch of the of that Slavic language family. Is quite difficult. So, for example, I find that Slovak, when I studied Slovak, it went back into my Czech and Polish very, very quickly. And when I wasn't using it now, it's not really active at all. Similar thing really with Slovene. I studied them both, and Slovene and Slovak, and they kind of get subsumed back into the other languages that I tend to use more often. And also have studied for longer and have studied more. I've always appreciated your intellectual honesty. Oh, thank you. I don't think there's any point in telling people nonsense. I think it's important to kind of to give a realistic picture. I mean, we get enough airbrushed imagery online, and I don't think it's helpful. I'd rather you had a clear idea of what I really think about learning and about the reality of this as well. Thank you very much for the update. Your 2024 was definitely romantic. Yeah, it kind of was. I've fallen in love with the Cornish, for sure. Hello, sir. Let's see. I want to ask, what's the best approved? Oh, sorry, it's a bit small for me. I'm trying to read it. Best approved to learn 3 languages at the same time. Finish one language and then moving on to the second. Is it better to learn 3 at the same time? Oh, it depends on the languages, it depends on you, and it depends on the kind of progress you're happy to make. So yeah, the more you learn, the more you're dividing your time, not just the study time, but the time you have to think about the languages too. So it's all well and good saying, yeah, just study lots of languages, but the reality of that is, how much can you spend? How much time can you spend, and how much vocabulary can you really internalize? If the languages are similar, there can be a danger of mixing. Not everyone mixes. Some people do. Some people don't. It can be frustrating. Some people find the mixing frustrating, some people don't. So I think trying it out is the important thing. When it comes to very different languages, bear in mind that there's a lot of energy needed to really internalize the vocabulary. So if you're flitting from one language to another, and then you've got also other commitments in life, then clearly something's got to give. So if you're happy with the rate at which you'll learn the languages, then you can give it a go and see, but always keep that in mind. Tiffany, you've learned 3 languages simultaneously: Spanish, Romanian, and German, and it was helpful. they're a slightly different level with each language as you study each one. Yeah. I mean, you'll find also that I think it's like Tiffany says, that some of the languages you'll kind of have an affinity with, and others maybe less. So absolutely, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Tiffany. Appreciate it. Hi Richard, which Romance language is your favourite, or do you use the most? I'm not sure really. I mean, I use French and Spanish fairly often, and I guess after that maybe Italian, and then Portuguese, and then Catalan. Romanian pretty much never. So my Romanian's got a lot weaker. But yeah, Ladino, I was studying Ladino for 2 years at Oxford University with Carlos Lope, and yeah, so I mean, I was focused on that for a little bit, and I did some Hackatia with him as well, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, I don't know if I have a favourite. Possibly French, but I don't really have a favourite, if I'm honest. When it comes to those, my favourite language that I really love is German. And sound-wise, I really like the sound of Icelandic, and I like the sound of Estonian. I don't know. There's something about it. I also like Maltese a lot. I've got to say, I've really. There's something about Maltese for me. The sound of it, when I hear the words or understand where the words come from, I really like it. And clearly, the Celtic languages, which has been my focus more recently. Hungarian, for the fact that it's a boss. I demand them to speak to me with their native languages. Yeah, Hungarian is a fun one, because this is another thing actually between Hungarian and Maltese, is that in Hungary, my Hungarian wasn't very good. It was functional to do things or get things I needed to find out basic information and stuff. But I used it all the time in Hungary. Maltese, yeah, getting Maltese people to speak to you in Maltese is a little bit harder, just because they all speak fluent English. So there's not really a choice. We're in Hungary, but there is in Malta, and they can all speak really, amazing English. So it's it's trickier. But when I spoke, they were very kind, and the typical answer, is you'll say something in Maltese, and they'll go, "Oh, it's great you speak Maltese," and they'll say that in English, and that's kind of the death to you. That's the worst compliment you can get, I think. The best compliment you can ever get as a language learner is just people talk to you normally, and there is no reaction. There's no, because the reactions are never great. I mean, sometimes, okay, the reaction could be they just, you look different from the people there who normally speak it, and therefore I get that all the time in the Balkans. They're not expecting me to speak it, but then as soon as I do, it just is normal. And I think, yeah, the normal reaction is always the nicest. Oi do Brasil, oi, tudo bem? I wanted to learn Chinese, but based on what I currently know, Mandarin words based on symbols, not like English alphabets, and that's what I found why it's kind of hard. Yeah, I mean, the characters in Chinese take time to learn, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm some expert in Chinese. I'm not. I did study it for about 2 years at university in Sweden, and yeah, I did the history. I did some courses on the history of Chinese characters, and I did, I studied the language and stuff to a fairly okay level. I mean, it was probably around, I guess, A to B1 ish, maybe. Um, I was sort of presenting things in Chinese, but nothing earth shattering, and I could make myself understood. Um, but yeah, I felt that the characters went away very quickly as well when I wasn't using it, and um, yeah, that was challenging. And so when I on recent visits to Chinese speaking places, I've been able to, if I'm in a real, in a really difficult position, then I can make myself understood, but it's not great, and the words fail me quite quickly.